Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to another session of Caffeine and Carrots. My name is Prithvi, and I'm very happy to welcome and have Jermaine Edwards with us today. Jermaine, welcome to Smart Carrot. Jermaine is a very active advisor. He's an author. He has spoken multiple occasions, different forums. He's a very active speaker, and I believe Jermaine, you have extensive experience in being a customer growth strategist, and you've worked with multiple organizations. So we look forward to this conversation. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, look, it's a pleasure to be here. Obviously, Smart Carrot is doing an amazing work in supporting the community right across the world in regards to really raising awareness around the importance of client management, but more specifically being proactive and understanding the customer at a really deep level.
And you recently shifted to the United States, so welcome to the country as well. And it'll be good for us to hear a little bit about your journey so far and what are you actively involved in right now.
Yeah, so if I speak about today, most of it is actually taking care of the family. So I have 6 kids. I have 1 on the way, so we'll have 7 kids by August, actually, as we're kind of recording this. So that's taking up a lot of time. But outside of that, I've always been fairly actively invested in a portfolio of companies over the last few years across a range of different sectors. So from waste management to technology to right now kind of in the retail industry. And the reason for that is that I've been fascinated with just how customers show up across different sectors. And what has become true to me over the years and just looking at the study is that actually customers look different everywhere. Mm-hmm. And although I think there are some commonalities, you will find in many regards, if you went to the Netherlands tomorrow or to Japan the next week, you will find a very different set of beliefs around what customer service and management looks like. Yep. Based on the cultural influences that's there. And so, but I actually find that cross industry based on the products and things that are there. And so that has really enriched my understanding around what it actually means to create not best practices, but best principles to actually help you navigate how you best serve the customers across the world in varying different areas.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And what got you involved into, the customer journey and the customer growth aspect of it, Jermaine?
It's somewhat by accident. So I ended up in sales like a lot of people by kind of definition of the first thing that came up as a student, right? Yeah. And so after leaving university, I'm like, okay, what do I do next? Well, let's just go into sales, because that was the place that you kind of went to while you're figuring things out. And so, but I very, very quickly figured out that I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed actually having those conversations and building up relationships. And the honest reality is I wasn't good at it to start with. In fact, I was pretty sucky at it to start with. It took me a number of years to really begin to build the competency and the awareness that actually there's a science behind this, as well as the art of the characteristics that come with the sales profession. But it wasn't really until much later in my career I got introduced to much more of a pure account management role, then had some opportunities to lead teams and bigger companies, that I saw the impact of what a true really kind of a true focused and invested in account program can really do for engineering growth for a business sustainably. And so as soon as I saw that, I thought, man, I need to go and spread the word more across many different spheres of work in industry. And that's kind of what kind of got me started in that area.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. And like I mentioned to you last time we connected, I have had a similar journey myself, so completely relate to it. I thought sales is the one which you can just get by just talking and not working too hard. So very early part of career, and then figured out very quickly that is not the case.
Yeah.
It is a lot of grind. It is a lot of science. It's a lot of work behind it. The talking is only probably 2% of it. So, but anyway, so this brings me to an interesting aspect. We have obviously seen this transpire over the last couple of years. We are actively living it right now as a technology platform ourselves. as you look at customer growth, there is this spectrum of, like we have experienced in our journeys as well, sales, actually pre-sales, sales, customer success, account management, and the cycle sort of keeps repeating. How have you seen this evolved, and is there anything you are seeing change, significantly over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so if we're talking about kind of the distinctions of roles across businesses, yeah, I mean, customer success, by any measure, I think has taken over the conversation, but more specifically within the technology area than it is across other sectors, although that's changing.
Yeah,
I'm finding even manufacturing in a lot of different industrial companies right now, financial services, you're starting to see these roles pop up. But if I was to really talk about a distinction, it's not so much about the role, but actually the I think that the roles are irrelevant to some extent, and I explain what I mean by it, because the roles actually present a very different kind of situation or a consciousness, and it's a consciousness of understanding that customers need help, and they need help in order to go and really get the kinds of returns that they believe they should be getting from the services and products that you agree with the customer to go and deliver. Now, I don't believe necessarily that that's a role, but I think rightly so, a role was developed in order to identify a problem that was there, which is, hey, we're getting real high churn because people aren't getting results in a certain area. That being said, I think the big thing for me has been the conscious movement of understanding experience and results. That actually experience and results that from a client perspective are the actual de facto differentiator that supports you in being able to have the right to have a conversation for renewal. That if you can have results and you can have poor experiences, and actually to some degree you may get away with that. If you don't get results, you poor experience. But when you have both, what you have is additional credible leverage to say, well, actually, these guys deliver this, as they say, on time, when they say it, and we have a great service in order to do it, and we're getting more than kind of addressable results. This now gives us the credibility to go and have a different kind of renewal conversation. And so that for me is the wider consciousness, because if we look at really the data going back, you'll find that actually this wasn't the case even 5 years ago. People were not investing in experiences the way they are right now. Customer success didn't exist. You had support departments, in other words, technical support departments, and those were very reactive. In fact, they still are today in many regards with respect to that. But I think it's more the consciousness of movement, of understanding where differentiation takes place, and the demands that customers have for actually getting the return on investment that they need.
No, I agree with you. Very well said. I think the role really is irrelevant. It is, there are certain fundamental things which need to happen. And it needs to happen with potentially a combination of roles at times or through a single role. Doesn't matter. That's probably what we are seeing differ from organization to organization. But these things need to happen at a bare minimum. And I think we are seeing that too. As you interact with a lot of the C-level and a lot of the board sort of mindset, being an advisor and investor yourself, and you mentioned this, the consciousness is changing a little bit more towards, what do we do with our existing customers and how do you grow it? Is there a change in the hierarchy organizations are looking at, or the org structure they're looking at, incentivizations thereof? I mean, a support team is incentivized in a very different way, which is why they are reactive. And a customer success team, if incentivized similarly, will also be reactive. So how do you balance this out, and what are you seeing in terms of, there is certain things which need to be done from an account management standpoint, certain things from a CS standpoint, value standpoint, and obviously renewal, sales, business discussions. It's a little bit of a hodgepodge, if you ask me. Is there some way to unravel this?
Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm trying to think where to begin with this, because I think what I've seen is that it has really varied across industry. I think in some ways, because of the proliferation and the expansiveness of the technology sector, they've had more of the transformation than perhaps any other addressable sector out there in regards to the distinctions of roles. From chief customer officers to chief revenue officers, and chief revenue officers having a broad remit around operational functions and how somebody grows, and chief growth officers. And I don't necessarily believe right now, and this is just my perspective of what I've seen, is that there is a one clear definition of what a chief customer officer looks like, or chief growth officer looks like. There really isn't. It just the variances are so broad, it's a bit ridiculous. So it's tough to really say, okay, well, there's lots of chief customer officers happening in this sector. That means that X is taking place. I think people are defining it how is it they believe it might fit best within their business, if that makes sense.
It does.
That being said, on the board level, what I'm encouraging, and again, I can only speak to the boards that I'm part of, is really getting the boards to think about what it means to truly be customer focused. And I think that perhaps maybe there's a conversation to be had on the differences between what it means to be customer centered and customer focused. And I'll give the distinction between that. So for me, customer focused here tells me that there is a desire for a business to have the customer in mind when they do initiatives. So an example would be, hey, we want to run an event and we want to keep our customers in mind. That, hey, how do we best serve them? It's customer focused. Whereas in customer centered says, how do we produce a result for a client and then we go build the thing? And we think about it from that perspective. So everything then is driven from the customer being the driver rather than the customer being the thing that we think about afterwards. And I think there is a distinction there, customer centered versus customer focused. So what I'm seeing directly within boards is this conversation around, well, are customers actually part of an agenda item on a leadership board meeting? In most cases, they aren't. And that's the reality. For a lot of big companies. But I'm seeing that change. Does everyone in the company own an actual KPI that is customer related? And it could be, if you're running a balanced scorecard, it could be part of what it is. Do you have dedicated spend to support greater service with customers? Do you have clearly stated documentation? It talks about the vision you have, who you want to become to your customers. There are a number of different, I think, qualifiers that are starting to show up within organizations that are defining whether or not they truly are customer centered or customer focused in one respect. And I think if I'm seeing anything, it's more of a challenge to, hey, what is that exactly, and how do we go out and do that well?
No, exactly. And I was talking to a prospect. This is an IT services organization, and they have a fairly decent sized account management group, and obviously they have a large delivery organization. So and the challenge is similar to what you mentioned, that whilst the balanced scorecard does have aspects of commonality between both account management and delivery, but it's still a challenge because that even a common customer view is missing, even a common customer plan is missing. Responsibility demarcation is missing. Who's talking to the customer? What am I talking about? Do I just talk about my delivery matrix, move on, and pull in sales whenever? Or do I actually go that extra mile and act? Because I am probably, as a delivery leader, talking more often to the customer and in a better position to consult than an outside salesperson coming in only when there is dollars being discussed. So it's an interesting thing, which brings me to a lot of this we solve as a technology firm to the extent we can through processes and common views and stuff like that. More collaboration, more predictiveness in terms of decision making, etc. But if you were to look at customer growth and highlight a few fundamental processes which organizations need to have, you can have these meetings in the boardroom and ask questions, but unless actually there is some implementation at the ground level, it's very difficult to change, right? So what are these some very fundamental processes in your mind which you think organizations should look at when they're either customer focused centric or driving customer growth?
So I'll say it this way, and again, I have some very perhaps counter views to the approach to more of a systematic view of how you view your company. But the first process that comes to mind here is one that's sort of simply around a process around engagement with customers in general. So what I find is, and I'll explain what I mean by that. And for me, the customer engagement is really kind of the context of how you communicate with a client at any point in time within the current cycle of delivery with a customer, right from even before your client is onboarded to being onboarded and so forth, going through the entire cycle that you have with that client. So for me, a process of communication really helps you to delineate lines of responsibility and measure very, very quickly and early in the process. So even if you don't necessarily have a clear segmentation process or a process for better understanding your renewal and what that looks like, or having even in the account plan process and moving that through, if you at least have something that dictates this is where we communicate with our clients and this is how we communicate with clients, these are the channels that we use, this is how they communicate with us, at least gives you a level of structure and control that allows you to bring those conversations into a single area and identify clear responsibilities of where people show up and where they don't. It also allows for teams, particularly in places where it can be less clear and more obscure, for them to actually look at that and go, oh, wait a minute, I think Susie from accounts is responsible here. Let me go and connect with her to figure out what that looks like. I think for me, that's one of the most fundamental, and it's perhaps the one that is missing the most. People have a lot of this really sophisticated processes, but in the end, it comes down to communication. So if you can have that process laid in with a clear understanding of, let's just say, that journey of the client, maybe that's the first process, the journey of the client, and what you want that cycle to look like based on the best fit for the client in getting that result or working with you directly, I think that helps a lot in the long run.
Wonderful. And a parallel to that, what are some common mistakes you have seen being made? So whilst people jump into let's do a customer centric or let's drive customer growth more aggressively this year, and then probably take a few missteps. Are there a few common missteps you have seen and you recommend people avoid from experience?
Yeah, I think the first thing is actually making a whole bunch of assumptions that you actually know the customer in the first place, and what the customer wants. And so I think we don't do enough of a real deep dive into really understanding what we believe we know about our clients. And so there's a really interesting book by a guy named Gary Klein. He's actually a psychologist, and it's a book on kind of cognitive bias and the things that show up in our everyday life and in business. But he makes a particular comment around the beliefs that we hold to be true inside our business is not actually being true until it's proven false. And so essentially, I will encourage businesses to never to act on something until you can prove it false or prove it true.
Right.
And so essentially what that means is as we're approaching anything with our clients, as we're thinking about doing anything with our clients, we want to prove it false or prove it true before we even start to kind of make any particular initiatives take place. And so if I'm talking about one thing that somebody gets wrong, it's making assumptions too early about what's actually going to serve the client or not, and what's actually going to be best fitted between you and your clients in the first place.
Right.
So I say that's definitely one of the areas. The second part here is actually not having a clearly stated vision of who you're trying to become, or giving people a clear understanding of where we're at, why we're actually doing the things that we're doing with our clients. So what I've often found is that this whole place of the customer being the center or the customer being important is a really nice anecdote. But if people don't know what it actually means for them within the context of their role, it's likely to show up in really inconsistent and unhelpful ways. And I actually found this to be true with a couple of retail organizations, a couple of B2B companies that I've been in supply with recently, where I spoke with one individual and had a great experience with that person, walked on to the other person, exact same values, exact same set of departments, but it was absolutely terrible. And so I'm like, this is the same leader, two different individuals within the same context of the team, two different experiences. And so at me being a consultant, I'm always really interested in these things. So I remember asking to speak to the manager, not out of spite or anything, but I was just curious. And I said, look, I don't mean to be difficult here, but I had this really great experience with this other person. I spoke with this other person. I'm sure they meant well, but experience wasn't great. I was just curious. Are these two people part of the same team, or are they part of two different complete cohorts, complete teams? They go, no, actually, they're actually started at the exact same time. The challenges, and we hire for customer service. What they didn't necessarily hire for the beliefs around those customer service.
Yeah.
What is the belief? And that's a very different thing. Yeah. We could all carry very different experiences of what we think is customer service, but actually the beliefs that we hold are really important. So I'd say one thing is that definition, is thinking about the definition. What is it that who we're trying to become, and how clearly have we made that to the teams and what it means for their roles in contributing to that.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Moving on to an aspect, I think, which will also be good to hear from you, Jermaine, is see a ground reality of where we are today and what most organizations also face, including us, is that there is a skill hierarchy, right? You need to, there is a base of the pyramid, there is a middle of the pyramid, there is a top of the pyramid with regards to skill sets and resources you have in an organization. And you also have a maturity curve there, you know. We may want a lot of skills in a resource or an individual, you know, and as you know, interacting with the customer, growing an account, etc. It's not, very easy. So it does require you to have negotiating skills, communicating skills, at times behave like a consultant, have the relationship management, customer engagement, as you said, be very, have the right set of beliefs, as you just put in. It's not that easy. So you still have to do it in a hierarchy, manage the costs well of that resource pool and manage it. So how do you recommend people, and what are you seeing, and what would you recommend, let's say, someone who's starting out, somewhere in that spectrum, what do they do to, if there is one or two skills you can highlight from an individual standpoint, and from an org standpoint, what are you seeing? How are people managing this skill matrix?
Yeah, so look, we're in a world right now where things move at really kind of at a rapid pace, and so I think the first thing that comes to mind, outside of the very fundamental things like communication and so forth, is really kind of what I would say is systematic thinking, or the ability to think critically about specific topics. So to be able to kind of take information in and to be able to disseminate the things that are most helpful to you and to the client in the moment in which you receive it. And that's a skill set all by itself. There's a real discipline behind that. But the ability to go do that, particularly when you're faced with data that you're just experiencing, and that happens to everybody. We're walking with a client, we're having a conversation, some new data is given to us, and we have some data in front of us. And what typically happens is that, and rightly so, we need to sometimes go back to the business to be able to really make sense of what we've just heard or experienced. But one of the things that actually is going to be what I'm finding to be extremely a high level skill that is truly respected by clients is being able to hear somebody give their perspective and opinion on something that they've just heard, and give it back to them in a way in which is beneficial to them. I'll give you a quick example. Just last week, Thursday, sitting alongside a very senior kind of leader who is with one of his reps. We turned up to a meeting. He wanted me to have a look at how they are really running their meetings with clients. And in the meeting, the client gave them a set of data points. Look, this is happening in our industry today. What do you guys think you can do about it? Because this is really important to us. And they took on the data, and he goes, hey, let's come back to you on that. The client was like really adamant. It's like, look, you guys can come back to us, but we got to make some decisions on this. And so in that moment, they had an opportunity to not close the conversation, but expand the conversation through more questions. And they can, and again, you don't have to be held to account on your perspective, but what the client is wanting from you is hey, give me your perspective here. What do you
Yeah.
think is happening? You know, you guys are the experts in this space, and you say you're going to go back and come back to me in a week.
Yeah.
I may not have a week to really go do that.
Yeah.
And so I think the ability to be able to take that and say, hey, well, let's have a think about this together. So here's what we're seeing in the macro economy. Here's what you've just relayed out. It sounds like to me that here are some risk factors and here are some opportunities.
Yeah.
That actually you can do that as an individual. You can do that as a leader. You can do that as a rep. But it takes some discipline. Takes some discipline of reading. Takes some discipline of thinking. Takes some discipline of being able to practice the communicating of those things. That's definitely one thing I'd say is going to be extremely important. Just the critical thinkingness inside a role.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think it's also a little bit of an intent issue. I mean, people may have the intellect to be able to do all of that, but if they not necessarily have the intent, so you need to go that extra mile before a customer meeting to research it, and, you know, just be prepared that, hey, you know, I want to be consultative. I want to have an opinion about, you know, how things materialize. And I think a lot of it is driven by intent. You know, we're running out of time, Jermaine. There's one thing I did want to ask you. A lot of moving parts in managing customer growth, fair bit of moving parts. You know, it's all over the place. There's this adoption to be covered, or service utilization to be covered, value to be covered, customer engagement to be covered, financial tracking should happen, customer sentiment there, experience there, you know, so many touch points across different roles from one organization to the other. Fair bit of stuff moving around, which also creates a large amount of data for us as a platform, for example, as we start tracking it. We are consciously trying to get ahead and provide, you know, the best decision-making capabilities to our users, which we call augmented intelligence, because finally, about managing customers, the human needs to make a decision. But what we could do as a technology platform is best provide and bubble up these insights or intelligence nuggets, as we call it, so that we enable you to make the decision better and potentially a little bit more proactive in nature. You may not have gone and, you know, run a query to find out a correlation, but if it's provided to you, you may just absorb it and, you know, take action on it more proactively. So is that something you are seeing? And, you know, how do you think this sort of an approach impacts both scale as well as, you know, the cost effectiveness of running a customer growth operations for organizations?
Well, look, data is super important. I was reading actually an article from Forbes that may kind of link it back to you, that actually said that ineffective management of data or poor data is actually costing businesses $75 billion a year.
Yeah.
So this is a big problem, particularly the maturation and harmonization of data where that exists. So I'd say that if a company isn't taking their customer data just as seriously in regards to how accurate that is, or the efficacy of it, the efficiency of it, the effectiveness of it, how it lands in very different user roles, how it's disseminated, how it's reported on, then they're missing out on a huge advantage that they can have within their industry, within their actual company, to leverage growth more dynamically. Because the moment you can begin to bring data into a place where you can see the most important pieces of data for your client in real time, right in front of you, that gives your teams significant confidence and a greater advantage than anybody else on the planet, because you're the one in that conversation with the client. There's no one else. There's no competitor there.
Yeah,
it's just you and the client. And so if you can demonstrate on that call that you know them better than they know themselves, that puts you in a very, very strong, credible position.
Wonderful. Great. We've just about run out of time, Jermaine. It's wonderful talking to you. I think we can continue this discussion for another hour, and we'll still
indeed
we'll be left missing. So it was very good. Any last thoughts of advice for our viewers from your side?
Yeah, look, I'll say this, and I've been a little more adamant on this recently with talking with leaders who are a bit frustrated with the performances of their clients, with not clients, but their teams. And for me, I believe this. I believe that really when you see poor performance with clients, that is an indication not of your team's performance, but actually of the inaccuracy and underperformingness of your systems and your own processes.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a hard look in the mirror here to really think about your systems, really the infrastructure that you have, and how you help drive those processes well. I think Smart Carrot does a great job in helping people really think that through and actually drive through those processes well. So if a business isn't thinking about that today, you should be doing it, because it's not your people, it could be your processes.
Wonderful, wonderful. With that note, thank you, Jermaine, so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll catch up soon again. Okay. Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. Take care. Okay.